G'day everybody. Listen, before we get into tonight's show, I'd just like to say a few words. Tonight I interviewed Christopher Quaratino, formerly known as Christopher Lutz. He is a surviving child of the Amityville Horror. Now in this episode, there will be a lot of long pauses. It is a very emotional interview for Christopher and for myself for what he went through. So please take the time, have a listen and take note what is said. Because this is one story and the real facts behind what happened in Amityville Horror that you do not want to miss. I'm very proud to call Christopher my good friend. Thank you.
Well, that's enough of that crap. Welcome to Naked Zombie Paranormal Radio with your hosts, Brad Scott and Woodsy.
Welcome to another episode of Naked Zombie Radio. I'm your host, as forever, Brad Scott. And look, tonight I've got a truly remarkable guest, and really this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have this sort of caliber of person on my show. I'll just give you a bit of a heads up. I'll read you a bit of a story first, and then you'll know who I'm talking about. U.S. Army veteran and Amityville haunting survivor Christopher John Quaratino is taking a stand. Quaratino was formerly known as a.k.a. Christopher Lutz, one of the three children of George and Kathy Lutz. The Lutz family lived through what became known as the Amityville Horror, and he is now actually 43 years of age. In all the years since the Amityville incident happened 35 years ago, all of which the Lutz children have remained silent publicly about what actually happened in this house, Christopher is now breaking that silence and coming forward. Recent news releases put forth by three separate Hollywood movie companies, each announcing the film to a sequel to the Amityville Horror. Three companies, three separate sequels, all currently to be produced in the same time. Two additional documentaries were already nearing completion, with a total of 5 films in various development stages. Christopher feels that the public never knew really what happened in the Amityville, and remaining quiet for so long is now no longer an option. Christopher has publicly challenged all the filmmakers to a contest, saying, "At what you do, you are good. But when it comes to the Amityville Horror and what happened after, I can tell you a creepier story than you." In rare comments from the Lutz children, Christopher, at the time of the 2005 Amityville Horror remake release in theaters, said, "So far there has been 3 representations of what happened in the house. Not one. That's it. Not one of them, not even the book, nor the original movie, nor the remake, have been accurate. And George Lutz brought the troubles on himself and his family by dabbling in the occult. It wasn't just the house that was a problem, and that's why it followed us. So please welcome, for the first time on any Australian network radio, Christopher Lutz from the Amityville Horror. Thank you, mate, and welcome to the show. It's absolutely a pleasure having you with us tonight.
Doing good. Thank you for having me on, Brad.
No, thank you. I can't thank you enough, Chris, for coming on the show. It really does mean a lot to me to have you here. Now, I guess the first question is, what was the outstanding features, and why have you decided to come forward about the Amityville Horror now after all these years? For what you went through and what your family went through, it's just amazing. I mean, I grew up listening to these stories as a young bloke in Australia, and the simple fact is, this is one of the most historic hauntings that has ever happened. I mean, you have circumstances and incidences that just defy belief. So could you please tell us a little bit more about what happened in these circumstances, mate, and how did it all come to be? How did you and your family get involved in being part of the Amityville, the event that just really shook the paranormal world?
Well, here it is. This has been 35 years since this happened. And to let this story continue to go forward the way it's been said up until now, And knowing how far from the truth what you've heard is, it's become necessary that I do this, because this, in the last 35 years, this story has been told, retold, mistold, and now it's going into its upteenth telling. There's already been 9 movies about Amityville with that name in its title, a number of books. It wasn't until, well, let me back up for you. I need to tell a little bit of a story in order for you to understand where I'm coming from today.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I'll tell you about how we got in that house. You know, when I was just a little kid, my natural parents divorced. Mom was a single mom working in an all-night diner supporting her 3 kids. Mom was a waitress in that all-night diner, and she used to work the graveyard shifts overnight. And George would often come in for coffee and sit at the counter. And one night, Mom tried to go home, and her car wouldn't start, so she began to walk home. And George chased her down on his Harley trike, gave her a ride home, and was the hero for the evening. And that blossomed into the relationship that got them to the point where they got married on July 4th, 1975. Mom sold her house. Us 3 kids, along with Mom, moved into George's house. George's house was too small. And so they began to look for a bigger house for our family. They looked at many homes, and then they came across the Amityville house. Now that house sits right on the water. I'm sure over there in Australia, you guys would love to have a boathouse in the back of your property, right up against the water. No matter where you are, that's the best property. And for that house to be available for $80,000, that was a 3,000 square foot home, 3 stories above ground, and then a full finished basement, plus a heated swimming pool. On Long Island, that was upper class. And the house was only $80,000, which turned out to be a screaming deal. And that's how we wound up getting that house.
Now, were you aware of the history of the house before you moved in?
Well, let me set this up a little bit more. I was only 7 years old. I was just being dragged along with the other kids. Mom's got this new husband. They get married in July, and they're already buying a house by December, right before Christmas, and we're getting ready to move in. They're still like in that honeymoon zone, you know? It was an amazing thing to get a house like that. And so, yeah, what it turned out to be was the reason that house was so cheap was because of the murders. That house should have been about $120,000 at the time. So it was 30% off, basically. It became what's called a stigmatized property. And so the real estate agent showed it to my folks, and, you know, they fell in love with it, and then she told them that the house had been the scene of the murders. Well, I've heard it said by my parents that they told us kids about it before we moved in. Now, I don't remember that conversation, but I do. The first instance I remember of that house was being in the basement of that house with the real estate agent. My mom and George were there, and then us 3 kids. And I asked the question, while in the basement, just this little kid, 7 years old. I said, "Is this where they hid the bodies?"
I mean, what sort of response did you get when you asked that sort of question?
Yeah, see, now, I think the reason I remember asking that was because of the look the real estate agent gave me. And then my parents looked at me, and then they looked at each other, and they looked at the real estate lady, and then I don't think they told me anything. And that was like the ignored question. So
How soon after the murders took place did you and your family move into the house?
It was 13 months later.
Not long, is it?
No, I think he had just Ronald DeFeo, the son of the eldest son of the family that lived in there before us, the DeFeo family. This son went through the home in Amityville and shot his mother and his father while they were in bed, and then he went and shot his two little brothers and two sisters. It wasn't a shotgun; it was a Marlin 35 caliber. It's a big, yeah. You can take down some big game with that, man.
A lot of noise, in other words.
That's very much. That's a bigger round than what we used in the U.S. Army in the M16.
Now,
This cartridge is huge.
Yeah.
So go through and, everybody got shot. So you're talking at least 6 shots. And I think the parents each got 2 hits. So you're talking that many rounds out of that kind of gun, and everybody stayed in bed. I mean, come on.
Now, from my understanding, the house is actually very close together. I mean, literally no one else heard the gunshots, did they? I mean, the houses are so close together, you could basically reach out and grab someone sitting on the toilet opposite you. Is that pretty much the case?
Yeah, I don't think either house to either the left or the right of it is more than, I don't think it's even 50 feet. They're fairly close. They're not, this isn't like, yeah, it's not off in a meadow. It's water property, so everybody's got, like, on Long Island, everything's jammed in there. So, yeah, there's like a marina back behind it. There's a lot of other boats park out in that, in the Amityville Creek is what it is. Well, I read somewhere, no, I didn't read the actual report, but it was an old article. It said that the cops went and asked 40 to 50 people if anybody had heard the shots back then. Yep. And there was nobody said yes. So that's pretty amazing. It was only 28 days.
What was the first incident that you went through that made you think there's something horribly wrong with this house?
You know what? As a kid, that house just became like at first it was an absolute new playground. Mm-hmm. You know, that staircase. Have you ever seen pictures of it?
Yeah, that's the picture of the young boy that's standing at the top of the staircase, isn't it, when the photo was taken?
I didn't see that boy.
Right.
But my uncle's wife did. They were getting ready to get married. They were staying at our house, and they stayed in that room. And my uncle's fiancée at the time, before they got married, she witnessed that thing in the room. She called it a blue boy, because he looked like he was blue, she said. Mm-hmm. So, that was a real testimony. My uncle witnessed a large amount of flies in there, and over in the sewing room. So, some of these things I haven't even thought about in a while, so it's like troubling still for me to talk about it.
No, look, and the audience really appreciates you taking the time to do this, mate, and I do realize it's very hard.
You know what, though? It looks like I have to look back at this. You know, this has been something, like, I might even explain why my name is different now.
Please.
You know, because I've tried to escape the story. It was that troubling emotionally. And then the way that, the story got twisted and people perceived it as a lie. I had no say at 7 years old what went in that book, or whether there was a book, or, this was the sort of thing you just don't tell people about, because they'll look at you differently once they hear a story like this.
Yep.
And so it's been a pretty difficult thing to deal with when I grew up. You know, to have the world consider, you know, something that was so traumatic to you, to pretty much mock it, and you know, I don't. It's hard for me to convey to you. Okay, well.
Yeah, mate. Look, we totally understand this has been very, very difficult for you, and the simple fact that people have taken the story that you actually lived and turned it and twisted it into their own way of thinking, and just to make a quick buck. It's very hard and understand that the emotional side of what you're going through has left scarring in a way, and it is a shame that these things do happen. But hopefully by you telling your story here on the Zombie tonight, that people will get a true understanding actually what did go on in that house. And like I said, you know, the time you're taking with us to explain it has just been wonderful, and we really do appreciate your time.
I couldn't believe what they did in 2005 with the remake of the Amityville Horror that starred Ryan Reynolds. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with that film?
Yes.
Yes.
Quite familiar, actually.
All right. When that first was getting ready to go to the movies, that film, the very first trailer, the commercial that was advertising the movie as you watched it on TV, started out this way. This is what it said. We found the children's diaries. This is the real story. And initially, that's how that 2005 film was sold. But I got news. None of us kids kept diaries. And nobody from that production company asked any of the kids for one single comment, let alone one real story. And so the way that they just twist, you know, listen, can you imagine listen, Brad, what got you into doing these shows about the paranormal? Did you have an experience yourself?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, well, you're probably right there, mate. Look, my experiences started very young in life, but seriously, they are nothing compared to what a lot of other people go through and what they do. But, you know, basically Naked Zombie was designed and produced for a lot of the Australian audience that doesn't get to hear a lot of the paranormal situations that occur around the world. And it is really and I'd really love to see more of it, to be out there and to get the message out. You know, this is a field that people do take to heart. It's my experiences are my experiences. Someone else's experiences, their experiences. And it does make it hard for people to come forward and come out and say, hey, this is what's happened to me. Where people have a place, especially in Australia, that they can tell their story and understand there is more to this whole field than what really meets the eye. And people like yourself who have taken the time to talk to us, to take the time to tell their stories, and hopefully people who listen to this will understand this, and they'll come forward with their stories, because, you know, at some stage everyone has had a personal experience or had a situation happen and they just can't put their finger on themselves. And like I said, you know, hopefully, you know, people hear your story and more people come out. And this is why I love radio so much. This is why I do the show, because it's more personal than TV. It's more, you get to know the poorest person at as deep a level than you could watching any program.
Well, I really believe that there's a lot to be learned from what I'll talk about.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of people that have experienced a lot of things themselves that are looking for answers that helps them explain what's happening to them. And if this story doesn't go forward properly by me, then all those people that'll continue to know about this story will never know the truth. And I've been embarrassed about this story. And that's why I hid from it, because such a deep-seated thing that it was so real to me. But then the way that everybody mocked it, and I never would have told anybody. It wasn't up to me though, and so it was difficult to deal with people calling it a hoax at 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, and every year going from one school to another because it became too harassing the school before.
When did you decide to change your last name? So to sort of escape from it, right?
Well, for the longest time as a kid, I would, somebody called my mother a liar, so I'd knock them in the teeth, And so, but then I'd get my butt kicked because I'm kind of a small kid. But I was still swinging. I didn't care, man. I don't. And you're calling me one too, it wasn't right. But that I didn't know of a way to deal with this growing up, except for doing it that way. And then while I was in the military here in the United States, I was part of the U.S. Army 10th Mountain Division. It's Special Forces of the Light Infantry, specialized training for. It's hardcore stuff. Yeah. Anyway, a sergeant got in my face one day. The movie aired around Halloween time like it always does. Mm-hmm. And this sergeant knew who I was, didn't like me much. I was in a different squad, and our squad was better than his. So one day this guy thought he'd get under my skin and this guy outranked me and just got in my face and was calling this story everything that you could imagine. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wanted to do to him what I had done when I was a kid. But now I was a trained infantryman, and I was afraid what I was going to do to that guy. And I knew I couldn't do it either because I'd wound up in deep trouble. Yeah. So after that, I decided to never let anybody know who I was again based upon my name association to the Amityville Horror. Yep. And I changed my name back to my birth name as my own style of witness protection.
Did you find by changing your name, Christopher, that you found you actually got the piece you were looking for? And what really made you decide to come out and make this public again?
Once I was getting out of the military and moving into a new place, nobody would know me based on my name. And unless they were close enough that I cared to share about it. You had to be a pretty close friend before I'd bring it up. Okay, well, the whole thing is it didn't end in that house.
So what you're saying, Chris, this was following you. Is that right?
Well, how would you like to proceed here? I mean,
to make it easier for you, because I know there's certain things you do not want to talk about, and which I fully appreciate.
Okay, well,
maybe on from what's happened after the Amityville.
Sure, I'll share with your audience a dilemma I have right now.
Okay, please do.
As much as I'd like to get this story off my chest now, with these movie companies getting ready to make their movies, if I don't copyright my story first before I say it, there's nothing that I can do to prevent these movie companies from adapting anything that I say into their movies. And so I need to write my book. And the reason I'm coming out now after all these years of being silent is because this story is never going to die. And people are going to be sold another lie. The name of the movies that they want you to go see next are the Amityville Horror, the Lost Tapes, as though they really found some lost tapes. There's another movie coming up called Amityville Haunting. And it's really kind of stupid the way they're going to sell this to you. Because they're going to take a real life murder that happened in a house somewhere else in America and stage this real life murder scenario in the Amityville house after we moved out. And
so just like that,
yeah, and what it turns out is that the name Amityville cannot be trademarked because just the name Amityville is the name of a town.
Yeah, well, we live, basically.
Right, so anybody can make a movie and call it Amityville now. Well, let me tell you a story about how I figured this out, that what got said. When I was a little kid, I was telling you about how I used to get in fights and all that at school. Well, and then I'd get sent to the principal's office, and I'd get a couple of whacks, because back then they were able to use a paddle on you, and it was usually a big one. And then I'd get sent home because I'd get suspended for fighting, and then George would give me a couple of licks for getting suspended, and then he wanted to know what's the fight about. Well, it's about the Amityville Horror and what these kids are saying. And he was telling me, you're not to talk about the book or the movie. And he didn't want us looking at any articles or none of the interviews that my parents had done back then. They just wanted us to forget about it and grow up. The problem was our names were named in the book, so everybody already knew it. It was too late. So anyway, George would tell me, if they say anything to you, you tell them to read the book because it's more accurate than the movie. And so that's pretty much what I did. That was how I got out of conversations.
But it's nothing like what the movie was. What actually happened, was it?
Well, I didn't read the book because I didn't think I needed to, because I knew what had happened. And it said a true story on the front. I mean, look, my parents did it, so I only, as a kid, trust, yeah. So what happened was, years later, in the year 2000, these guys started contacting me to do a documentary on the History Channel. And they were calling up, and I really didn't want to talk about it. And so I got off the phone, I hung up on them. I'm like, anyway, they kept calling back because they really wanted my interview, because none of the kids had ever spoken. And these guys are like persistent. I'll shorten up the story because I know we're going to run out of time. Basically what happened was, I told them I didn't want to do it, but then they kept calling, and they got me to the point where I'm like, well, if I was going to consider doing your interview, I'd want to list all your questions up front and a copy of whatever it is you're expecting me to sign. So they said, yeah, we could do that. They sent me over the list of questions. I'm looking these over. And Brad, one of the questions is asking me, what's the difference between what really happened in the house and what it says in the book? And I wasn't going to be able to answer this question on TV, man, because I didn't know what it said in the book. So I got a copy of the book, and I'm sitting there going to read it. And Brad, imagine this for a minute. In my hands, I'm holding your childhood family photo album. And I'm going to look in the pictures of your family photo album and start to tell a story. I'm going to tell the story of what happened to your family, looking at the pictures of you standing around your Christmas tree. Another one of you, on New Year's, because that's how long we were there. We moved in like the week before Christmas. We lived there through Christmas, through New Year, a week later, and then halfway into January, we got the heck out of there. So we weren't there very long, but this is a family photo album of your 28 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, imagine I'm telling your story. How accurate would I be if I'm looking at your family photo album? Not very accurate at all. Yeah. So here I'm holding this book in my hands that says, "The Amityville Horror: A True Story," and I'm getting ready to read this book to answer a question for the History Channel. And I begin to read the book, and I can't believe what I'm reading. Right off the bat, it's like, well, it's already written like a diary. You know, like day by day below, this is what happened. And it's not what happened. As I'm reading through this thing, I'm getting pissed off. Because there's so many differences as I go from page to page, and I can't believe what I'm reading. And then there's some really phenomenal things that are like triggering these memories of what really had happened as I'm reading this thing that's inaccurate. And so now I'm dealing with what really happened again. Like I just scratched open this wound from my childhood. And then, you know, now I'm getting angry because this is the book that I've been telling people all these years to read because it's more accurate than the movie. And this thing's like trash. I can't believe what I'm reading. This thing's portraying George as though he's a victim of this haunted house and a hero to the family, saving us in the end. But the real story is quite different. Yes, very much. There's these stories that you've heard compared to what really happened are very different. When you call up what George had called up, I don't care where you do it, it's going to be a problem. But to do it in that house, where it already had a history, was just created a storm. And that's why it followed us, because he called it up.
Now,
and that's why nobody else has had a problem in that house since we've moved out of it.
According to a lot of reports, I mean, even the new owners say there's nothing in that house.
Well,
it's different to what it used to.
Oh yeah, it just changed hands a year ago. The guy put it for sale for $1.15 million, and sold it. Somebody else is moving in there. He sold it for $950,000. I don't think the new people that were buying it from him knew that there was 5 movies getting ready to come out. Well, three motion pictures and then 2 documentaries, and well, I guess that makes me number 6. So I don't think the new people that just bought the house knew just how many more people were going to wind up going by their house one more time.
I mean, this is what people, I guess, in a lot of ways, Christopher, don't understand is like when you call stuff up, it can follow you. It can track you down from house to house. So, yeah, fair enough, the new owners may have sold it and they've had no problems with it whatsoever. But if George was doing this, I mean, and this is what people don't realize, this can happen. This is a serious matter in the paranormal. People get all excited about, hey, let's see what we can do. Let's have seances. Let's do this. Let's do that. Unless you actually know what you're doing. Yeah, sorry, mate, just quickly. Was there something about your mum's dad or something involved?
My mom's dad, you mean?
Yeah.
On this? No, I don't. Not on this. No, Mom had a health challenge with a thing called valley fever. Yeah. Do you guys have that over there?
Yeah, I've got something pretty much like it.
It's like a spore in the dirt, and it kicks up, and then it goes into your lung, and because your lungs are dark and warm and wet, this fungus grows in there. They wound up cutting off the bottom half of my mom's lung. They cut off the bottom half, folded it over, and stapled it shut and sent her home. And so I was caring for Mom, and then we get this call from these guys from the History Channel wanting us to do this interview. And so I read the book, and I couldn't believe what was happening, right? So I just find this out like 3 days before this History Channel interview. And I'm going off. I'm so pissed off about the way that what this book has said. And I'm living with my mom because I'm taking care of her because she's so ill. And I've never yelled at my mom before. This was just, but I was so pissed off about what I'm reading in the book. She can't figure out why I'm so mad. So she's in my room trying to calm me down. I says, Mom, read this. I gave her a page. I don't even remember what it was, which page in the book it was. But I sat and I watched as my mom read down the page, and I watched her facial expression. And by the time she got to the end of the page, her jaw dropped because she knew it was just as much. I better find a bull
No, look, mate, you're right. You say how you want to say it. It's fine. I'm not run by anybody. We're privately owned. So,
it was bullshit, man. That's what it was. And so, I was pissed off, and I'm watching Mom's expression. I'm like, what's up with this? What's George doing? And I find out that George is getting ready to come to this interview to be interviewed for the History Channel thing. Mm-hmm. And it not only that, but the guys that were calling me up saying that they were with the History Channel, well, they didn't tell me that they were just making a documentary that was going to air on the History Channel. The way I understood it, they worked for the History Channel. And it turns out that the guy that's wanting to interview me is writing the next book. And the guy that's going to be actually asking me the questions on camera is writing the next movie.
So a load of crap, in other words. They were just trying to fish information out of you.
They were wanting me to come in for $200 and tell them everything that happened, and they were getting me to do these things. And it turns out that they were working with George. And George is planning on making another movie. I'm like, what? And so, yeah, I went to the interview, but I took my own camera, and I walked in there, and I started interviewing them. And I'm asking them, what's this next movie about?
I like your style.
And they says, well, the one guy blurted out, it's about a son returning to the house 25 years later.
Yep.
Oh, I went from pissed to freaking irate. And, imagine, man, these guys they were trying to get me to come in for $200. They're writing a movie about a kid from the Lutz family returning to the house 25 years later. I'm like, oh, no, you're not. And so I did everything I could to stop it. And I found out what George was doing. And it turned out not only was it going to be about a son returning to the house, but it was going to end with the son killing the father in the end through telepathy.
And this was George's idea.
He was on board with it. They called them.
You don't have a very good relationship with your ex-stepfather now. Because and I'm sorry to say that it does happen in families from time to time.
That's the way it was.
So how are you, Chris?
And it turns out that
Chris, when did you decide to say, yeah, enough's enough? Yeah, I'm not taking any more of this crap. I'm going to make a stand for what I believe and what is the truth. What was really the driving point that made you decide to do that?
Well, it was the listening loss. How can you help me?
Well, that's what it comes down to, mate. At the end of the day, it's like...
I'd ask that any of these future projects that you see coming out from movie companies having to do with Amityville, if you don't see me in it, don't buy it. And maybe they'll start making it.
But if you are in one of them, please let me know, and I'll make sure I put out there which one you are in, mate, so at least you could...
All right, I'll tell you what you can do. This coming October 30th. Now the time's going to be different for you guys. But Sunday, October 30th, Halloween Eve, the night before Halloween, I'm going to do a fireside chat. It's going to be the first time ever one real-life creepy story from any of the kids from the Amityville Horror.
Yeah, where can everybody see this, mate?
It'll be a webcast. So what it's going to be is a fireside chat from the fire pit in my backyard, hot chocolate in hand.
Oh, I love it.
It's a pay-per-view, $5, and that's creepy or your money back. Yes, the reason I'm going to only tell one real life creepy story is if I can't tell the whole story, otherwise those guys will use it. But it'll just give you a whisper of what I went through. Sometimes I still get chills when I tell this story. Like I said, this didn't end in Amityville. That was only the beginning.
You okay, mate? You coping all right with this?
I'm still nervous about talking about it. I know I'm going to be like exposing my heart. I'm honored to have a chance to finally speak my piece on this. It's eaten at me, the way that this story's been told and all the way that it's been. I mean, come on, this last movie, look, it was as though you people were told that you heard my real story, and nobody has. And it's like, and I see they're going to do it again. It's like, oh my God, no, not again. When is it going to end? But it's not going to end. Sure. Well, let me address some of the reasons that this story is called a hoax. You know, there's been several parties that have, you know, jumped up and down screaming that it's not real. And there's several reasons that that you might notice nobody's able to do anything with. Okay, the fact that there was a murder in there. Is there a reason the house would not be haunted? And if the answer is yes, that house could be haunted, and not only could be haunted, but, you know, based upon that murder, there's good reason it would be. Now, I know there's been a lot of people that have given it a lot of reasons that they think it happened. Dr. Hans Holzer had done an investigation in there with a trans medium. The trans medium believed that she was communicating with an Indian chief. I believe that's how the story went. You know, there's so apparently this was a headless Indian that she was speaking for. Something happened to the guy's head. Some children played with it, or, you know, it was kind of a crazy story. I don't know what to think about that myself. And so there's been a lot of people that said a lot of things about the story. And you know, once I had read that book and I reflected upon what really did happen back there, and now that I'm older, as I was able to look back upon the things that I had experienced when I was so young, I didn't have understanding of that stuff when I was, and you can experience a thing at that young of an age. You know, when it gets burned into your memory bank because it was a traumatic experience. You know, Brad, you talked earlier about when you were young having several encounters through your whole life. You're saying the earliest one. How old do you think you were?
Mate,
funny.
We moved into the house at Gladstone after we lost everything in the floods. I was now 5 years of age. I mean, pretty much since we moved into the house, it was just going crazy.
Right, and so yeah, you're nearly able to like go ahead and tell me that whole experience right now, because it got burned into like your memory bank, man. So, you know, for me, there's a lot of details that you're able to look at back from then, as an adult with new understanding with all that you've learned through your years. And so now you're able to recognize different things. To me, I was trying to explain to myself why what happened. I mean, some of these other people, you know, and Lorraine Warren, they believe they sensed something, but to me it was why. And so I, you know, as an adult now, I actually been investigating. Once I saw what George had written and knowing where, you know, look, there's a reason he left out that part of the story. You know, Hollywood painted a very a wonderful picture of the guy. So, I mean, why would he not like it?
Well,
they make him a hero. So, you know, it was, George even sued me. You know, we had a long going thing. Once I found out he was trying to make a movie about his son going to the house and killing him in the end of the movie through telepathy, I took that very personally. And so I was battling it out with George, and it turns out that the guy that wrote that movie the screenplay for that movie is the one that's writing the one for the Lost Tapes. And so, I don't know what this guy's going to do. When George died, I thought that the story was going to die. No, those contracts continue in his death. So now his contracts haunt me. So on top of the other stuff that I deal with.
Yeah, Christopher, look, there's also a book coming out too. I mean, a first-hand experience of your experiences that happened at the Amityville location. Can you give us a few more details about when it's coming out and roughly what it's about for us, please?
Well, I was going to try to push myself to have it out by January because that's when their movie was supposed to come out. Mm-hmm. But they just announced that they have postponed their movie. So rather than rush my book, I want it to be take my time, do it right. Yep. Not just rush this thing out so I can, try to beat them to the punch, because they're going to do what they're going to do no matter what. And I'm only going to write this book once. I don't know how long the story continued on, so it'd be a pretty long write.
No,
it's something that's difficult for me to even talk about. It's tougher for me to just sit here and sit at a blank screen and try to write about all these negative emotions. Maybe girls do that good, but I don't know, man. This is if I feel like I'm telling somebody the story, it flows a lot better than me just trying to type it to a blank screen.
Yeah, I can understand that.
It feels like it's a conversation.
I do have a question though. So, I'm just trying to work this out, mate. And so our listeners understand, you are still going through very much a lot of pain and hurt through this whole incident. And these production companies are just making it worse for you. That's basically what it is in a nutshell, isn't it?
Well, this is the weird part about it, Brad, is it happens in cycles. And I don't know that it's specifically from Amityville. There's a thing that happens when you call up spirits and it attaches to the head of the household. Because as the spiritual head of the household, now in the spiritual context, those demons that you've called up now get to mess with your family. And I thought that I had it broken off. But it's, as I look back, it's like a cycle of about similar to a 7-year cycle, man. There was some stuff that happened to me. Well, I don't know what to say about it. When I was just a little baby. And so it was at 7, then later at 7, we moved in that house. I had some pretty hair-raising stuff happen at 42. I'm now 43. And then to see these guys going to do what they're going to do, I'm like, look, if anybody should be making a sequel, actually, we should just start over. So,
not the break for the sequel.
Yeah. And so it's just, there's stuff that's continued. I don't, to say it's from Amityville, I think it's from something dark. It's not just Amityville. Well, I'd really like it if your listeners would find me on the internet at www.amityvillehorrorchallenge.com. That's amityvillehorrorchallenge.com. You can find me on Facebook by the same name. Yes, I've got that fireside chat coming up, and in fact, Brad, I'm going to be talking about something that happened recently. Wow. And that's the story I'll be telling at my fireside chat, Halloween Eve, coming up. Terrific. That fireside chat is basically what that's going to do is the revenue from there. What I'd like to do is be able to, hopefully, if the response is good enough, and I'm offering it for $5 or your creepy or your money back.
I like that.
That's not just a gimmick. That's confidence.
Yep.
Okay. The funds that I raised from the pay-per-view, I'd like to start my own production company and be my own executive producer and keep the story true to what it is. Not that I know how to make a movie, but I'm sure I can find somebody that's willing to help me. I don't want some production company coming up and saying, "Yeah, we'll make your movie," because I've been approached, and I'm not just going to let this thing go out twisted up like you've seen it before. There's some very interesting life lessons to be learned from this story, and so it's critical to me that I keep it with integrity going forward, because I hope you guys, basically what I'm hoping is that people will be able to learn from this and see it for the, the betterment of the paranormal community, that you understand how I did my best to dissect this thing.
Mate, your story is amazing, and I'm sure my listeners are just gobsmacked what's happened. And I'm sure that the people who do take the time to listen to this will finally get an understanding about the man Christopher Lutz and what he went through. You're a good man, mate, and I'm so proud to call you my friend.
Thank you. I'm kind of speechless. That was very nice of you to say it that way.
No, fine, mate. I appreciate it.
I just want this thing to come out as real as I can keep it. I want to be me. I didn't want to be a celebrity. I was just a kid that got dragged into this thing. Now I just want to tell you what really happened. And say thank you for your support. And Brad, thank you for sharing your audience with me.
No, it was my pleasure. Christopher. And please, like I said, yeah, look, mate, you're going to have to let me know officially when the book comes out so I can put it out there for you and get people to read it and actually enjoy what the book is going to be about and get a proper understanding of what the Amityville Horror was to someone who lived in that situation, who was actually there. Not some Hollywood producer, not some director who thinks he's going to make a quick buck out of it, but someone who was actually there and went through what you went through.
Thank you, Brad. I was kind of speechless there for several times. I hate leaving that dead air spot, but sorry, man, it's tough to talk about still.
Look, mate, don't think nothing of it, Christopher. You know me better than that. Look, you know what the zombie's about. It's getting people's stories out there, and yours is one of the most amazing stories and actually be able to speak to someone like yourself all the way across the other side of the world, the actual Amityville. We've seen movies, read books, there's so much stuff on it, but actually speak to one of the living people from that, you can't get better than that. And this is what I mean, mate. Yeah, we've been talking for a long time now, and it's just wonderful to have you on the show. It really, really is.
Never did I as long as I've tried to avoid this, I never imagined I'd be speaking to people into tomorrow.
I'm speaking to the past and you're speaking to the future. Yeah, I know what you mean, mate. The future is scary.
It's just, we're on the other side of the world, man, and I know that it's really humbling, man. And I don't even know how to approach this. This has been something scary that I dreaded all these years to do. Yep. And I'm overwhelmed at how you've received me the way you have. Thank you.
Mate, it's always a pleasure to speak to my guests. Really is.
Thank you.
It's 9 o'clock for you now. I better let you go and sort the rest of your night out.
Cool name for your show, man. Naked Zombie. How'd you come up with that?
Well, actually, that's turned out. You know how you got the Naked Chef, Jamie Oliver?
I don't watch that much TV, man.
No. All right, you're in trouble now, mate. You want to know that story? Well, Naked Zombie started off many, many years ago when I was young, drunk, dressed up like a zombie for a Halloween party, stripped off in the main street of town, down to my socks, running around with face paint on, screaming at people with nothing on. That's how Naked Zombie came to be, and that's why I get the nickname, the Naked Zombie. So I just carried it across to the radio show, and I'm really embarrassed now. I'm going to hide somewhere. And
okay, I won't tell him the story. I'll let you tell it on air.
No, you can tell the story. I don't care.
That's
it's out in the open now, anyway. I think.
That's a good catchy one, man. That you should. Yeah, you get some mileage out of that.
Oh, I've got plenty of mileage. All right, my friend. I'll let you go, and I'll speak to you later, right?
Okay, Brad. Good night.
Cheers, brother. See you, mate. Bye. And I'd just like to thank Christopher for taking the time to come on Naked Zombie tonight, and it's wonderful speaking to you, mate. And listen, please join us again next time on the Naked Zombie radio show, where you're going to hear more about pop culture and the paranormal all joined into one little nice box. So, like I say each week, have a good night, have a safe night, you're out investigating. Please take care of yourselves. I'm Brad Scott, and I'll catch you next time.